6. I spoke one sentence at dinner. My Amish husband silenced me for a month. The chipped blue bowl was still warm from the stew. I remember that. The lamp hissed softly above us. The kitchen smelled of onion, damp wool, and wood smoke. Outside, October rain tapped against the window frame. Across the table, my husband lifted his spoon and lowered it again. Lifted it and lowered it again. Scrape against enamel sounded louder than the rain. My throat felt tight. My hands would not stay still. What I did not know yet was that I had already counted 17 suppers without hearing his voice. And what I am about to tell you, I have never said aloud exactly this way before. My name is Mary Amish Home, and here on this channel I share the stories that sat quietly in my heart for many years. If you enjoy these gentle evenings together, I hope you will subscribe and stay close. And before we go on, tell me where you are listening from tonight. Sometimes it helps to know who is sitting at the table with us. By the 17th day, I had stopped waiting for an apology. I had stopped waiting for anger too. Anger at least has a sound. Anger moves the air in a room. Silence does not. Silence sits down beside you and eats supper with you. That evening, I carried the stew pot from the stove and filled the chipped blue bowl first, the way I always had. Steam curled up toward the lamp. The smell of carrots and beef hung in the kitchen. He sat across from me, 3 feet away, close enough for me to hear every swallow. 23 minutes passed. Not one word, only the scrape of his spoon, only the rain against the glass. In the home I came from, marriage was built from small things, not grand speeches, not long talks, small things. Pass the salt. Horse is favoring one leg. Looks like rain tomorrow. Amen. Looking back now, I think those little words carried more weight than we understood. In our district, people sometimes spoke about Gelassenheit, about yielding and humility. Most often it was spoken of as a grace, and many times it was. There are seasons when silence can wear the same clothes as humility and mean something altogether different. I did not know which one I was living through then. The strange thing was that the silence had started before the sentence. It took me years to understand. At 28, I thought I had caused everything. I believed the words had broken something. But even then, if I had been brave enough to look closely, I would have noticed the signs. He came home later from the barn. He left earlier in the morning. His eyes carried a distance I could not measure. A neighbor mentioned land prices after Sunday worship, and I watched something pass across his face before it disappeared again. When I asked what was troubling him, he smiled politely and changed the subject. That Tuesday in October was not special when it began. That is what still surprises me. Important days rarely announce themselves. I washed jars after breakfast, folded linens before noon, swept the pine floor after dinner preparations. Ordinary work, the kind that fills a life. Yet all day there was a feeling I could not shake, like hearing a wagon long before it appears on the road. Something was coming. I did not know what. I only knew that every time I reached for the blue bowl sitting on the shelf, my eyes lingered on it a little longer than they should have. The bowl had belonged to my mother before it belonged to me. I remember her hands around it. Thin hands, capable hands, quiet hands. When I was a girl, I used to watch her serve supper and wonder why she always seemed to stop herself halfway through a thought. A sentence would begin behind her eyes and then disappear before reaching her lips. At the time, I believed that was simply how women grew older. Now, I think perhaps she had learned what many women learn. Some thoughts are folded like clean linens and placed high on a shelf where no one asks about them again. By the 20th day, I found myself talking to the bowl, not loudly, just little things. The sugar had gone up again. One of the barn cats had kittens behind the feed sacks. The weather was turning colder earlier than usual. Foolish things. Yet once I started, I could not stop. The bowl sat on the counter while I kneaded bread or peeled potatoes, and somehow it became easier to speak to enamel than to the man sitting across from me. He listened no better than the bowl did. Yet the bowl never made me feel foolish for trying. Looking back, that may be the loneliest thing I have ever admitted. was another woman 2 farms over named Naomi. Years before, after a terrible loss, she had gone nearly 40 days speaking only when necessary. People called it grief. People understood. They gave her room. They waited. Nobody judged her for it. I used to think about Naomi during those weeks, not because our stories were the same, but because silence had entered both homes and made itself comfortable. Difference was that everyone could see hers. Ours sat hidden in plain sight. To anyone watching us at church or at a family gathering, nothing seemed wrong at all. What I will tell you eventually is the sentence itself. I have carried it for 47 years. I remember every word. I remember where my hands rested. I remember the smell of the stew. I remember the sound of rain against the window. But before you hear it, you need to understand something. The sentence was not born that Tuesday. It had been living quietly inside me for 9 winters already. And on the 23rd evening, as I lifted the blue bowl from the shelf, the lamp caught something I had never noticed before, a thin crack running through the enamel. I turned the bowl slowly beneath the light and wondered whether the crack had always been there, or whether it had been growing for years, while neither of us was looking. The crack caught the light for only a moment, then it disappeared again. I stood there with the bowl in my hands, turning it slowly beneath the kerosene lamp, while rain whispered against the window. Looking back, I think that was the first time I understood that not every break announces itself with a sound. Some things split little by little. A marriage can. A heart can. Even a bowl can. I set it carefully on the table and filled it with stew. My husband washed his hands at the basin. Water, towel. Silence. The same order every evening. The same order that had become its own kind of sentence. What I did not know then was that only 8 suppers remained before he would finally speak again. Days between 24 and 30 passed in a strange blur. Not because anything happened, because nothing did. On the 26th day, I found a jar of apple butter on the counter. He had left it there after returning from town. No note, no explanation. Just the jar. It felt like kindness. It also felt like distance. 2 days later, he ate supper at his brother's house and returned after dark without a word. The blue bowl sat unused that evening. I washed it anyway, dried it carefully, returned it to the shelf. Some habits survive even when everything else changes. I suppose this is where many people expect a great confession, a terrible argument, a shocking betrayal. But that is not the truth. The truth is smaller than that. The truth happened on an ordinary Tuesday in October of 1979. The lamp was lit, the stew was hot, company was expected the next day. Rain tapped softly against the glass. I remember looking down into the bowl rather than directly at him. I remember my hands feeling strangely calm after carrying the thought for so many years. Then I spoke. I think I would have liked to learn to read music, that was all. No accusation, no complaint, no demand, just a wish. A small wish spoken too late. He set his spoon down. The scrape against the enamel seemed louder than anything I had ever heard. He did not look at me. He did not raise his voice. He did not leave the table. He simply finished his supper, bowed his head for prayer, stood, and walked away. The next morning he answered only what necessity required. After that came 31 days without his voice. For many years I tried to understand why. I blamed myself first. That seemed easier. Perhaps I should have remained quiet. Perhaps I should have folded that wish away like all the others. Perhaps I should have been content with singing the old hymns from memory. Age has a way of sanding sharp edges from old stories. Now I see something different. Both things are true. He was not a cruel man, and he was cruel that month. Both things are true. I loved him, and I feared speaking honestly to him. Both things are true. The life we built contained beauty, and it contained silences neither of us knew how to name. I do not believe the Ordnung told him to punish me. I do not believe any minister instructed him to do what he did. What I believe is simpler. He grew up breathing the same air I did, an air where some wishes felt dangerous, even when they harmed no one. An air where a husband could hear a wife's longing and mistake it for satisfaction. An air where a woman could spend 9 winters swallowing a harmless dream before finally letting it out. The system was not a person. It was the weather around us, and weather shapes people more than they realize. There is something else I have never confessed, not even to my daughters. Years later, one of them came to me carrying a dream of her own, a small thing, nothing scandalous, nothing rebellious. I remember listening, I remember feeling afraid for her, and instead of encouraging her, I answered with silence. Not 31 days, not even 31 hours, but long enough for her face to fall. Long enough for me to see myself repeating something I had promised I would never repeat. That memory troubles me more than the month ever did. If you are listening tonight, perhaps there is a sentence you carried for years before speaking it. Or perhaps there is one you never spoke at all. If you wish, tell me in the comments. It does not need to be the whole story. Sometimes a single sentence is enough. Day 32 arrived without ceremony. No sunrise felt different, no angel sang, no lesson announced itself. We sat at supper as we always had. Blue bowl rested between us. The lamp hissed softly overhead. I placed the salt cellar near his hand and waited. He looked up, only briefly. Then he spoke. Pass the salt, that was all. 31 days ended with 3 words. No apology, no explanation, no discussion of music, no mention of the sentence. I passed the salt, he nodded, and supper continued. I did not cry then. I waited until the dishes were washed, until the lamp burned low, until I was alone. Then I sat with the bowl in my lap and cried for every word neither of us knew how to say. I never spoke that sentence aloud to him again, at least not exactly. Years passed, children grew, winters came and went. Then one winter after he was gone, when I was 61, I found a small hymnal at a secondhand sale. I brought it home, kept it hidden in a drawer beside my bed. Night after night, I studied the marks above the notes, slowly, quietly, patiently. No teacher, no audience, no announcement, just an old woman and a wish that had refused to die. And eventually I learned. Not much, just enough. Enough to follow a melody on paper. Enough to understand what I had wondered about all those years. Enough to know the sentence had never been wrong, only difficult, and now, after 47 years, I can finally say his name, Eli. Eli was a good man who did one long unkind thing, and I was a good woman who spoke one small true sentence. Both of us were obeying something older than ourselves. If you have ever spoken a quiet truth at your own table and been answered with silence, I hope you remember this. Wanting something gentle does not make you selfish. Speaking a wish aloud does not make you ungrateful. Some sentences cost a month, some cost a marriage, some cost a lifetime of unread music, but the sentence still belongs to the person who speaks it. Blue bowl sits on my shelf tonight. The crack has not grown, and for the first time in 47 years, I ladled my own supper into it and spoke the sentence out loud to no one but the lamp. Some evenings, I still take the hymnal from the drawer. Pages smell faintly of dust and cedar. My fingers move slower now than they once did, but they know the path. A note here, a pause there. A melody I spent half a lifetime believing belonged to someone else. I do not think about the silence every day anymore. Age has a gentle way of sorting memories. The sharp ones become softer, the heavy ones become lighter, but now and then, usually when rain taps against the window and the lamp throws a circle of gold across the table, I find myself thinking about that Tuesday in October, not with anger, not even with sadness, mostly with understanding. There were things he carried that I never fully knew. There were things I carried that I never fully shared. That is true of many marriages. What took me years to learn is that a wish does not become wrong simply because it is inconvenient. A quiet longing does not become selfish because it makes someone uncomfortable. I spent 9 winters hiding a sentence. He spent 31 days hiding a response. Neither of us was free during those years. When people ask what I miss most, they expect me to say his voice. Sometimes I do. But the truth is a little different. I miss the chance to sit across from him one more time and tell him that I finally learned the notes. Not to prove a point, not to win, just to share the joy of it. I like to think he would have listened, And perhaps after all those years he might even have smiled. Bowl remains on the shelf. The crack remains too. Neither one has disappeared. Neither one has grown. And somehow that feels like its own kind of peace.